Hey guys, back with another video for you today, and I'm talking about a resin that I haven't really highlighted on the channel. This is a resin that I've been very curious about. It's called Elemi Resin, and it's typically found in the top and the heart notes. And the one fragrance you guys are probably familiar with that features this note is Dior's Eau Sauvage Parfum, the 2017 version. It's in there pretty prominently, but there's a lot of other great fragrances that features Elemi resin, and I'm going to tell you about those fragrances in addition to what Elemi resin smells like coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Sebastian talking to you about Elemi resin. Let me know if you're familiar with Elemi resin. A few weeks back, maybe several weeks back, I did a video on Davana, and I mentioned in that video I wanted to learn about this note, very curious, and the way I'm now really studying notes that I'm not typically able to, access, because there are certain ingredients that you can go to the grocery store and access and learn how to smell, but I can't just smell Elemi resin or Davana. In this case, I bought essential oil of Elemi resin. You can see right there, I'll have it linked in the info box for you. And I started smelling this, studying it, put it on skin, all that good stuff. It's a great resin, love the way it smells. It's a bit peppery and lemony at the same time, slightly smoky like incense. There's a bit of a pine-like effect happening as well. And it's usually, as I said, used in the top or heart notes. Typically, you might find it in the base notes as well, but most of the time it's featured up top or in the heart. And I guess the note itself is kind of a fragile note because base notes are heavy and dense, like, sandalwood or vanilla or ambers and resins and things like that. And even though this is a resin, it seems like more of a fresh resin, peppery, spicy, smoky, and citrusy, and also pine and camphor-like qualities as well. It's a great resin. I'm happy to be doing this video and letting you guys know about it. And again, if you've been curious about certain ingredients and fragrances or notes, these essential oils are really great. Just get a couple off of Amazon or something, or somewhere that sells the stuff near you if you have like a health food store or something, or some markets sell these things discounted and things like that. And just smell it, put it on skin, and just start studying the smell, and then go back to some fragrances that featured this particular note and see if you can pick it out in that fragrance. It's a great way to do that. You can do it in your normal world as well. Like if you're buying a lot of mint, study it, smell it, eat it as well, because you can eat that stuff, and then see if you can spot it in fragrances and so on and so on. So I'm happy to be doing this video. As I said, let's get started with the list. This is Dior's Eau Sauvage Parfum, the 2017 edition. This is the first fragrance I'm highlighting today. This is an unranked list. The reason I'm highlighting this one first is because most people know about this fragrance. They used to be in a different variation in 2012 featuring myrrh. There was no Elemi resin then. They've reformulated it in 2017, which is this version, and they replaced the myrrh with Elemi resin. So there is definitely a citrusy edge here, and it's also spicy. It's got a peppery spice, the Elemi resin. You can experience it there. And for me, it was great to smell this and then smell this again. You can kind of try and figure out what the Elemi resin smells like. But there's also vetiver here, bergamot. There's additional citruses, woods, and floral notes that come in aromatics, and a great fragrance from the house of Dior. I hope they don't reformulate it. This is Dior's Eau Sauvage Parfum 2017. I'm going to smell a few fragrances on camera for you because they might be new, but that one I know for sure I've worn quite a bit of, and it's an amazing fragrance. But this next fragrance from the house, a new house I haven't spoken about, is EPHEMERAL DYADIC. This is OZYMANDIAS, this one right here. Let me know if you're familiar with this house. It's a new startup house, very young, and this is a great representation of Elemi resin. For me, this is an Elemi resin focused fragrance, but also ambery, vanillic, musky, woody, and peppery spicy as well. You've got all those things happening, but this is shining a light on the Elemi resin. And you can totally pick it out here in this fragrance, along with the vanillic notes, the ambery notes, the musky cashmere wood note, and the peppery spicy notes. Really fantastic fragrance. It smells great, guys. Really wonderful. If you want to learn how Elemi smells like, that is a great fragrance to try. But this next fragrance has been a favorite fragrance of mine. This is from the house of Les Eaux Primordiales. This is Vanille Supermassive. In fact, we featured this in a kit, and I've spoken quite a bit about this one. It's a vanilla fragrance in the end, but resinous and also slightly gourmand and musky and molecular, but it has a pretty prominent Elemi resin note in here. and you can totally pick it up. It's slightly tangy, slightly peppery, spicy, and a little smoky as well. I think it's added into this fragrance perfectly, not to overwhelm it, whereas the OZYMANDIAS is really highlighting the Elemi. Here it's nicely balanced with everything else. So this is Vanille Supermassive from the house of Les Eaux Primordiales. Then going to the house of AMOUAGE. By the way, I'm going to let you know there's a ton of AMOUAGE fragrances in this list. I guess AMOUAGE really likes to use Elemi, because I was going through the databases and on their brand's website to make sure that the Elemi was definitely used, and you can totally make sure that these fragrances have them. With material from AMOUAGE created by Cécile Zorokian, not necessarily a very widely used like note here, because in the end it's a resin. It's also has those qualities of citruses and peppery touches and smoky touches and pine and things like that. But mostly this is a amber vanilla gourmand with a very overdose of like resins and amber. So in the end it's a gourmand vanillic ambery, but some spiciness comes in and slight light citrusy touches of that Elemi resin comes in here as well. So it's material from the house of AMOUAGE. Let me know if you have been able to smell these fragrances I've spoken about so far, and if you can pinpoint the Elemi resin. Add a comment below. Alright guys, up next going to the house of Thomas DeMonico. It's Fuego Futuro. So this one has that smoked sage note, and I feel like the Elemi resin, and also there's Timur pepper here, really nicely complements the kind of smoky, ashy notes that are in here, because we've got spicy, smoky quality about them. And so the Elemi resin with its citrusy touches and also its smoky peppery touches is a perfect complement to this. But in the end, to me this is very aromatic, spicy, but you've got that smoked sage, so it's on the smoky side, and it's also kind of green. To me it's like rolling hills in Northern California during the hot Indian summer autumn months. Kind of has that kind of a smell to me, but the Elemi resin is nicely in there to complement it and give it a bit of a more peppery, citrusy edge. So that's Fuego Futuro from the house of Thomas DeMonico. We're going to a smaller indie niche house from Germany called Atelier Oblique. This is Bohemian Woods. I've been a fan of this one. I actually have 2 bottles. I have one at home and I've worn quite a bit of it. It's a really, really great fragrance. What I really like about this one, it's got a lot of absinthe as a note, and the Elemi resin really complements the absinthe, giving it more of an astringent quality, adding its peppery spiciness as well. But it's got leather, there's lots of woods here, red pepper, vanilla, iris, incense. Really great, very antique woods-like quality with this fragrance, with the overdose of the absinthe and the Elemi. Really wonderful stuff. If you haven't tried this, please do. Bohemian Woods from the house of Atelier Oblique. But this next fragrance from the house of AMOUAGE totally makes sense to feature Elemi. This is Search. Search is a very citrusy fragrance, also smoky, and it has the kind of incensey touches, and it totally makes sense to amplify the citrusy touches with a bit of a smoky, peppery quality of the Elemi. Totally can smell it here, but this has Cade, Vetiver, Guaiac wood, Omani green, frankincense, Elemi resin, but also citruses. It's got a very citrusy, fresh touch, but there is that kind of smoky, peppery stuff floating throughout the fragrance to give it some depth and things like that. So AMOUAGE Search from the house of AMOUAGE. It's a great fragrance featuring Elemi resin. Then this fragrance from the house of AMOUAGE as well. It's Portrayal Woman. It's a great fragrance. It's also kind of on the masculine side. It's a tobacco fragrance with a lot of jasmine, and there's vanilla and Elemi resin. These are basically the notes, and all of these notes together, really wonderfully created fragrance by Anique Menardo. She did such a great job with this one. I really love the pepperiness and the citrusy touches that hits the jasmine and the vanilla that's in here. Really a nice contrast and a great smelling fragrance, and the tobacco-ish touches in here are also really, really wonderful. If I did not mention tobacco, there's a lot of tobacco in here. It's a nice contrast with the tobacco and the jasmine together with the vanilla and the Elemi resin. Really, really fantastic stuff. I really love this stuff. It's when AMOUAGE was making some more gender bending kind of fragrances, whereas they were making women's fragrances more on the masculine side, and men's fragrances a bit more on the feminine side, but still all very unisex offerings. But Portrayal Woman is top notch. Alright guys, this next one is a cheapie and a staple in a collection. If you're building your collection, you definitely need this in your collection. This is from the house of Lalique. It's Encre Noire à la Extrême. For sure, one of the best cheapy vetiver fragrances, very masculine. It's smoky, it's spicy, it's grassy, it's earthy, and also citrusy with the peppery, citrusy touches of the Elemi resin. And it has a bit of an ambery base when it's drying down with benzoin. There's sandalwood and patchouli. There's slight powdery touches along the way, but very dark and smoky, grassy, earthy take on a vetiver fragrance that's on the really budget side. So this is Enquenoir à l'Extrême. Wonderful offering created by Nathalie Lorsan. But moving on to the House of Orizael Legrand, this is Rêve d'Océan in one of my very older bottles. I bought this like over 10 years ago now. It smells great though. In this one, this is a resin focused fragrance, kind of like a churchy, incensey fragrance, and the Elemi resin is so prominent in here. Mixed in together with a lot of great notes. There's a bit of vanillic touches in here, aldehydic touches, and spicy, warm, spicy touches. But we've got a Popanax, benzoin, incense. For sure, it's a bit of on the gourmand ambery side for an incense fragrance, and also peppery spicy with the Elemi that's in here. Really wonderful stuff. Rêve d'Océan. I got to start speaking about that. Maybe upgrade my bottle as well, because this is one of the older bottles. But next, going to the House of Matthew Zink. It's Charlie by Matthew Zink. This is it right here. Very animalic, sweaty fragrance. Lots of Elemi resin here. There's definitely a peppery, spicy touch in this, but also very sweaty, spicy, and leathery as well. It's leather, cumin, Elemi. There's cedar, nutmeg, patchouli, cloves, Georgie wood. A lot of other notes, but when you wear it, it smells animalic and sweaty, spicy. So you've got to be into these kind of fragrances, and the Elemi resin really shines through here, adding its peppery, spicy smokiness with a slight citrus edge. So that's by Matthew Zink. I'm always confused with the name of that house. Well, it's Matthew Zink, but I just don't know if the name of the fragrance is Charlie. I think Charlie is the website. I think this fragrance is just called by Matthew Zink. But then we've got a fragrance from the house of Francis Kurkdjian, Maison Francis Kurkdjian. This is Oud, the original Oud. And this is mostly about oud, Elemi, patchouli, and cedar together. Really great creation and very wearable oud. It's a very classy and also elegant take on oud, but it has those earthy touches, woods, lots of woods, and a bit of resin with that kind of Elemi that's in here that's really nicely contrasted against the oud and patchouli and the cedar. The Elemi is providing its kind of citrusy edge to it. You definitely have a little bit of that in there, but peppery and spicy, and a bit of camphor pine touch in there as well. So that's oud from the house of Maison Francis Kurkdjian. That's the original, not the extrait de parfum. There's a ton of different ouds in that house. Alright guys, we're going to the house of Laboratorio Olfativo with their incense fragrance Sacreste. You guys familiar with this one? So incense fragrances definitely will have the addition of Elemi sometimes, and here it's perfectly added to this fragrance, even though it's an overdose of incense and fumescence, along with cistus labdanum, hydrocarbon resins, black pepper, cypriol, ambermax, musk, cashmere, woods, and Elemi, but it's basically a very churchy incense-like fragrance. Are you guys familiar with this house and the fragrances of this house? Let me know. This is one of their earlier fragrances. This came out before Vanagloria came out. But there's definitely a sharp citrusy tartness behind all the smoky, ambery, resinous touches in here. And the fact that the Elemi provides... It does smell a bit antique, I should say. This Sacreste smells a lot like the oil. A lot. The peppery, spicy smokiness is quite prominent, but it's nicely blended with all the resins that are in here and the frankincense and things like that. That is Sacreste. But moving on to another AMOUAGE fragrance, this is probably the last AMOUAGE. This is Rose Incense. And here, with the rose incense, I love this fragrance from AMOUAGE. Really great combo of rose and incense notes. The Elemi really kind of brightens up the rose even further because the Elemi resin has that kind of citrusy brightness. Even though it's quite peppery and spicy and smoky, it does have that kind of quality that brightens up the rose and makes it fresher. So you've got these kind of smoky, resinous, ambery notes in here against the freshness of the rose and then the brightness of the Elemi resin. Really wonderful fragrance, definitely one of my favorites from AMOUAGE. That is Rose Incense from the Opus collection. Then we're going to the house of Xerjoff. This is Addl, this one right here. Are you guys familiar with Addl? I didn't realize this was an Elemi balm. It's an Elemi balm, guys. The way the fragrance is created, it's very woody and earthy with some powdery touches. But there's the Elemi that comes in, gives it that kind of spicy edge, kind of an astringent, peppery, citrusy edge with all the woods and spices in here. So there's also pink pepper, papyrus, woods. It's a woody experience, very woody. And so if you are into those kind of fragrances that have this kind of peppery, citrusy edge to them, you can totally enjoy wearing this one. The Elemi kind of adds that kind of peppery astringency and makes the fragrance a little more exciting in comparison to wearing something just a bunch of woods together. I mean, there are floral notes thrown in and ambery touches thrown in as well, but it's an overdose of a lot of woods and kind of earthy notes. It does have orris as well, making it powdery, but I really like the way the Elemi shines in that, giving it its, you know, peppery, citrusy edge. And then going to the house of OZYMANDIAS, it's Incense Cuivre, this one right here. So this is another fragrance that utilizes Elemi resin, and of course it's another incense-focused fragrance. And it makes sense that they're using the Elemi resin in this. In the end, it's a lot of myrrh with patchouli. There's frankincense and of course rosewood, ambergris, musk, and vanilla for some sweetness. But that Elemi resin is in here for its smoky, spicy, peppery, citrusy qualities. This one's very peppery. It's almost like they've brought out the peppery side of the Elemi resin, but there's also a lot of other peppery notes because the frankincense to me is very peppery to begin with. So it's basically a very peppery take on an incense, a churchy kind of incense. And with this one, there's light traces of the citruses in the background. Really wonderful stuff. I really like this. I gotta pull this out and wear this more. This is Incense Cuivre from the house of OZYMANDIAS. They do make some great fragrances, that brand. They haven't really received the hype that they kind of deserve, I think. So up next, going to the house of BINET-PAPILLON. It's the #1 fragrance from this house. It's just #1 or 1. It's called Alchemist Pepper. And this, to me, the Elemi resin in this is bringing out all of the peppery touches. If you're into peppery fragrances, this is definitely one for you to try. There's a lot of vetiver here. There's a lot of violet, cistus, patchouli, and of course Elemi resin and petitgrain are in here as well, and peppery notes. So it's an overdose of pepper. It's very spicy, woody, and aromatic, and resinous. So it's got a bit of the citrusy edge with that Elemi resin. And of course we also have petitgrain, so it amplifies a little bit more of the citruses together with the Elemi. And of course the peppery edge is also amplified because the Elemi resin has that peppery spiciness, smokiness. Wonderful offering if you're into peppery, spicy fragrances that have a lot of woods and earthy notes. That's BINET-PAPILLON #1 Alchemist Pepper. So this next fragrance I'm a big fan of. It's YSL's Baby Cat. And this version of this fragrance utilizes Elemi resin, whereas Laboratorio Olfativo's Vanagloria doesn't have Elemi resin. That actually has a pineapple accord, so I wonder if that's what utilizes this kind of bright, citrusy, peppery smokiness that's supposedly in here. But if you don't know Baby Cat, it's vanilla, olibanum, black pepper, saffron, cedarwood, suede accord, Elemi resin, and pink pepper. So they basically amplified a lot of peppery touches. And in this case, they've also amplified the smoky touches because you have the pepperiness in the Elemi resin and also the smokiness with the olibanum and the black pepper and pink pepper in here. And it adds a little bit of that kind of bright citrusy astringency, and it kind of blends in beautifully with the vanilla and the suede and cedarwood. Really wonderful offering, one of my favorites featuring Elemi resin. It's Baby Cat. And then this next one's also a fantastic fragrance. This is from the house of Histoire de Parfum. It's 1740. I think they've dropped the name Marquis de Sade, but one of my favorite fragrances for a long time. Absolutely love this. It's a bit naughty, but it's also really delicious. It's Immortelle. There's leather, patchouli, Elemi, labdanum, birch, cardamom, artemisia. Super sexy. The patchouli is really amplified here. The leather, it's a bit animalic. The Immortelle kind of gives you that kind of molassesy, brown sugary, caramelized consistency in this, and the Elemi provides that spicy, citrusy, peppery edge. This is one of the best fragrances from this house. Let me know if you're familiar with 1740. And then the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is from the house of Maison Violet. It's Abîme. Abîme or Abîme? So this is in the end a Palo Santo fragrance, but utilizes the Elemi resin note, and I think it's blended beautifully together, so it adds that kind of slight citrusy resinous quality, but providing a bit of smoky peppery edge to the Palo Santo, sandalwood, cedar, incense, black pepper, and chili pepper. In the end, it's woods and spices together, and a match made in heaven with those notes working beautifully together. It's also not very dense. It wears light and airy, but you know, with some substance with the peppers and the spices and the smoky touches and the woods. And that's the last fragrance for you guys, Abîme from the house of Maison Violet. Just keep in mind, these bottles are no longer like this. The brand redid their bottles. They're much smaller bottles now, and they seem very young now. But those are my Elemi resin fragrances, guys. Those are 20 Elemi resin focused fragrances. Again, check out these little oils if you're into the idea of learning about specific notes. They have so many different ingredients into like made into essential oils. It's a great way to learn how things smell, and then you can spot them in fragrances that you're trying to, you know, study about and learn about. Again, there's so many out there. I'll have a link to this one, and I'll also put the link to the Davana one. I might do more of these in the future. Stay tuned for that, but let me know your thoughts on the Elemi resin fragrances and also the resin itself. Are you a fan? Do you enjoy the note? And are you curious to learn more about the fragrances I discussed today, discovering some Elemi resin focused fragrances? Add a comment below, and thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.